Hi everybody, Dean Sweetman here, along with Frank Barry. Mate, it's good to be back in the new year.
Oh man, it's so good to be back. It's beautiful in San Diego. Enjoying a little rain, but the holidays were amazing. Christmas was awesome. We travel a bit with the family. I don't know about you, but getting back home, settling in is also awesome. So great time all around.
We did a little trip down to Australia, and which was incredible. Saw the parents and friends and stuff. So, and then came home. But yeah, I couldn't wait to get back into it. We had such a great year last year, all around, on so many fronts. And I was pretty excited to get started this year. So it's good to be back in the saddle.
Wrapped up the year with just over 9,000 churches and ministries using the platform in a bunch of different countries. So super exciting. Awesome. Feel super blessed. It's amazing to jump into 2019.
So we've got a great show today, kicking off the new year. We've got Joshua Becker. We're going to introduce him in a moment, but he's written a book all about minimalism.
Yes.
And the benefits thereof. So I'm excited to have Joshua with us today.
Yeah, it's a great, he'll jump in here in a sec. It's a great way to start off the new year, like season 2 of Tithely TV. We had the first not full year of getting it going, did a bunch of shows, and now we're jumping into season 2 and have some. Joshua, of course, is going to be really fun to talk to, and we've got a bunch of other great guests lined up. So that's going to be a fun year.
So without any further ado, Joshua Becker. Hey, mate. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing wonderful. How are you guys? I'm feeling a little pressure now based on those kind words, but it's good to be here. Good to be here, guys.
First guest of season 2, so, we got to make sure it's a home run.
Even more pressure. Even more pressure.
So, mate, let's dive in, because I got to confess something. I did not know about your book until...
Sinner.
Oh, I know, 100%. I'm going to repent. And
everybody on Facebook,
then I went and...
We're live on Facebook, so everyone on Facebook, please shame Dean right now, automatically.
Yes.
Just in the comments.
I did not know about it.
I should have named it the Purpose-Driven Minimalist Home, apparently. then you would have known it? Okay.
Probably. But, then I went and looked at, and give me some credit here, Frank. Then I went and had a little peek, and I knew Joshua was going to be on the show. And I mean, the more I read, the more impressed I became. And so I think probably ought to be great, first up, if you just start talking about your journey from ministry and into this whole subject of, the minimalist life.
Sure. Yeah. I was a pastor for 15 years. I did both youth ministry and associate pastor at a church plant here in, I'm just outside Phoenix, Arizona. My grandfather's 97, and he is a full-time pastor. He's been in ministry for 77 years. He's been pastoring. He used to tell me, number one, he would say, Josh, if I had 100 lives, I would give every single one of them to the ministry. And then he also said, Joshua, if God has called you to be a pastor, don't stoop to be a king. Mm. And I took it to heart. I loved it. I loved being in ministry. I loved pastoring. I loved doing what I was doing. A little over 10 years ago, I was introduced to minimalism by my neighbor. It was just a short conversation. I was a Saturday morning. I was cleaning out my garage while my 5-year-old son was playing alone in the backyard all morning long. She introduced me to the term. She said, my daughter's a minimalist. Maybe you don't need to own all this stuff. As I was complaining that I had to spend my day taking care of stuff rather than playing with my son. And so I made the decision that day that we would become a minimalist family, or at least more of a minimalist family. I started blogging, started a website, becomingminimalist.com, which was just a diary, a journal where I was writing what I was doing and what we were getting rid of, what we were learning. About 5 years into it, it continued to grow and grow and grow to the point where I couldn't do both. I couldn't pastor full time, and I couldn't tend to the writing and the opportunities and requests that were coming in over there. So about a 3.5-year period of kind of wrestling with God. What should I do? Do I go write or do I pastor? went full-time writing about minimalism. So I've been doing that for 5.5 years. We have over 1 million people that come to the website. Every single month. The Minimalist Home just came out in late December.
Wow.
And I speak U.S., Sweden, Canada, Poland, Brazil, been all over the world talking about minimalism. So something I'm very passionate about, and something I feel called to talk about and spread the message.
Yeah, so it's interesting, maybe kind of a side tangent, but you started off just by blogging online, and this is 15 years ago?
10 years ago.
10 years ago. Okay. And how did you see it picking up steam? Like, it's sort of you, like, viewer of one, right? And then how did you see that grow, or where did the growth come from now that you look back over 10 years?
Yeah, a couple of different things that I would look back and point to. I never went into blogging to become a blogger, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of people who blog and their dream is to become a full-time blogger. That was never me. I was just writing. But it was growing and little different things, mention here, an interview there, self-published a book. So like a few different key periods, I think that kind of spurred some growth. But for the most part, honestly, I just say that people will email me and they're like, tell me, how do you grow a blog like you did? And I just say, I have written 2 or 3 times a week on the same topic for the last 10 years. And like over that length of time, I think people have come to find it and get to know me and appreciate the views that I bring on some of these things. And I mean, let's face it, we just live in a world where we're constantly told to buy more and more stuff. And I think when we find a voice encouraging us to own less, we tend to be, we're so oversaturated with stuff. We tend to be drawn to the idea of it.
Yeah. No, I mean, totally makes sense. So could you describe the journey a little bit? So you had this conversation with a neighbor, and I can relate to, it's Christmas, right? It's the post-Christmas cleanup of the house and the stuff, right? And we're cleaning out the garage. Like, everything goes from the house to the garage, and then you're packing things up. So I'm in that mode a little bit. I might be a little behind. But you had this conversation, and then that led you on a journey. So from there all the way to now, like, what did that look like? And maybe part of that, you can describe what minimalism really is for our audience. There might be some people that don't totally understand.
Sure. So if I were to go back to that, like, very original conversation, I remember the moment to this day. I had pulled everything out of the driveway. Like, it was just spring cleaning in Vermont. I pulled everything out of the driveway. My neighbor says the word minimalism. I remember looking at the pile of stuff in my driveway, knowing that my things weren't making me happy, or at least I would say that my possessions weren't making me happy. But out of the corner of my eye, there's my son swinging alone on the swing set in the backyard. And this further realization that not only were my things not making me happy, but my things, everything I owned, was actually taking me away from the thing that brings me happiness. It was distracting me from fulfillment and purpose and joy in life. So that was kind of the light bulb moment of, I get it now. Like, I understand minimalism. I understand why people would adopt this as a lifestyle. So we began going through our home. Took us about 9 months to get through it. I say about 2 or 3 months to get through most of the lived-in areas. Another 4 to 5 to 6 months to, like, basement and the shed and the garage, right? Some of those other spaces. So it took us about 9 months to get through our 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house. 3.5 years later, we moved into a smaller home. When we made that change, we got rid of even more stuff along the way. So I kind of look at it in, like, phases, like a 3-month phase and a 9-month, and then even 3 years later, there's, like, even more things that we were parting with. So that's what it looked like for us. There are a number of people that write about minimalism online, and everyone does it a little bit differently, depending on family, depending where they live, depending what jobs they have, right? A minimalist farmer is going to own something different than a minimalist writer. It's very different from one person to another, but mostly what it is when people know what they want their life to be about, or what their values are, or what their purpose is, that then minimalism aligns to that. So anyway, yes, for my definition, the definition of minimalism for me is, minimalism is the intentional promotion of the things I most value by removing anything in my life that distracts me from it. So that's kind of how I embrace the idea, and how that looks for me is going to look different than anyone else.
Right. And 10 years ago, you mentioned there's other people writing about it, talking about it, and I've seen some of that myself. So 10 years ago, did you see much of that, or?
No, there were some people writing about it. Leo, Tammy, Colin, like some names I can even picture, but there weren't any, like there was no blog dedicated specifically to minimalism. I don't remember any books coming out about minimalism. Like it was, people were doing it, but I don't know if anyone was really dedicating their life to promoting it and promoting it and helping others do it as well.
Yeah. What was one of the biggest like challenges of it for you? Like, you're giving up things that don't, help you focus on the things you want to focus on. So what were some of the spots that you had to struggle a little bit through that?
For me, there were like some, honestly, two things. Any of the large spaces that just housed a lot of stuff like the basement, like I mentioned, like it just took a lot of time and a lot of effort, and same with the garage. I go back and I try to think of, was it hard to part with clothes or sporting equipment, toy? Not really. Like I didn't really struggle with those things, but some of just the effort that needed to go into it. I'll say this, maybe in terms of like what was really difficult or something that surprised me as well, was I think the inward journeying that this process forced upon me. You took like 2 van loads of stuff to Goodwill and it felt great. But like the 3rd van load of things to Goodwill, like I started asking myself some pretty difficult questions, starting with, like, why did I have 3 van loads of things in my house that I didn't need?
How did that happen?
What prompted me? Like, what was the motivation to go buy stuff that I didn't need to have to live my life? And it wasn't a lot of healthy motivations I found. I think I saw jealousy and selfishness and greed and trying to impress other people, and advertisements had more of an effect on me. I don't know. I think I was more tied to the world than I ever thought I would have been. And that was difficult. Like that process of trying to sort some of that stuff out in my own heart.
Well, I think it's amazing. Obviously at Tithely, we serve churches and ministries in a bunch of different countries around the world. So there's this, and you were a pastor for a long time. So you went from being a pastor, serving in the youth ministry and some churches, into minimalism, but there's definitely an intersection, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on like the intersection of not loving the world, right? Because that's a biblical concept, right? We're not supposed to love the world and worldly possessions. Our treasure's somewhere else. And this journey you're going on is like, I don't want to call it the extreme way, but it's definitely like, sounds like it's made you really think and really dig in your heart, right, with your family. So what's the intersection for you? How do you connect that to, the church and the biblical teachings around, not loving the world?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's extreme. Personally, I mean, we still live in a house and has 3 bedrooms. And so, I mean, it's not like, it's very interesting. I mean, when you look in the Bible, like there are some people that Jesus calls to leave everything, right? I mean, he tells his disciples, like, leave your fish, like leave your nets and leave your boats and let's go. The demon-possessed man is cured by Jesus, and he comes running to him and he's like, I'm ready. Where are we going? And Jesus says, no, you go back into your city and you live in your home, and you be your witness there. So we do find Jesus calling different people, I think, to different lifestyles. For me, it was very interesting because as I began owning less stuff, I found that I had more time available to me because I was just doing less cleaning and organizing and less shopping. I had more time. I had more money. I had more focus in my life. I had less stress. Randy Elkhorn says every increased possession adds increased anxiety onto our lives. I was living a life that was a better example for my kids, better for the environment, a life that I think spurred about more gratitude and more generosity and more contentment. Like all these like incredible life-giving benefits were coming to me as I began owning fewer and fewer things. And I remember telling my wife one time, I'm like, where's this been my whole life? Like, how come no one told me? Like, how come no one told me about minimalism before? And I, of course, caught myself mid-sentence because like, this isn't new. I mean, Jesus was saying the exact same thing thousands of years ago, right? Sell your possessions and come follow me. And John the Baptist is talking about giving up your extra coats and giving up your extra food and don't store up, don't build these big storehouses that you don't need. And life isn't found in abundance of possessions. And so like all these things that Jesus said about money and possessions, and I knew him my entire life.
Right.
But for some reason, whenever I heard Jesus talking about giving up possessions, I'm like, either he's really testing my faith or he really wants me to live this miserable life. Like he wants me to give up everything now, but at least I'll have treasures when I get to heaven. Like that's kind of the trade-off until I actually started doing it. And I began noticing as I owned fewer possessions, I was freed up to live a more purposeful, passion-filled life. Following Jesus, I was able to do more of the things in my life that I thought that he was calling me to do rather than just accumulating a bunch of things that I didn't need. So, I mean, that's as big of a kind of a light bulb moment for how like certainly my faith impacted my view of minimalism, but then I started to see how when I actually began doing what Jesus invited us to do, it wasn't a sacrifice at all. It was just like anything else he said. It was a better way to live life now and forever.
Yeah, interesting. It's kind of for as you were speaking, the thing that went off is like when you set your mind on like, oh, I want this new car or I want this other thing. You start to like see it everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so it's almost like you started, going through that and getting rid of the things that you didn't need and sort of shrinking down, and then you started seeing, in the scriptures, how that was, very much aligned with Jesus' teachings, like more and more. It's like it came to life. So that's pretty cool. I want to jump back to the topic of generosity and the impact on generosity. But before we go there, I'd love to know, like, why'd you write the book? So you started on the blog, that progressed, and then you decided to write the book. So talk to me about, why the book and what have you seen from writing the book?
Yeah. So the book is called The Minimalist Home, a room-by-room guide to a decluttered, refocused life. I've been writing about minimalism for 10 years, right? And so I have seen, there are some people who say, why would you need to write a book about owning less? Just tell people to own less. There's nothing more to it than that.
Right. Like one sentence, like own less.
Yes, right. Like,
here's all the scriptures. Like,
how's your book more than one sentence long? And honestly, like I go back and for me, like it was just one conversation with my neighbor. Like it was not much more than a sentence where I'm like, you're right. I'm in. Like, how do I work this out in my life? But after 10 years of writing about it and helping people do it, I've seen that there are a lot of common obstacles and hurdles and roadblocks and burdens, that there are a lot of people who are drawn to this idea of owning less, but can't quite seem to get there or don't know how to get there. And other people who like they want to declutter their home, but they haven't seen some of the deeper motivations behind it. Like how does this spur generosity, and how does this how does this change family? Like some of those really deeper level things to it. So Anyway, the book is great. It goes through like 18 spaces in the home and like very practical
Like
step by
chapter
step.
by chapter, so people can go,
Yeah,
okay, I'm
how
doing the
to
bedroom.
yeah,
Let's
how
go through
to
the bedroom.
how
Yeah.
to do it, but I think it goes beyond that in a way I'm pretty proud of, that it not just how to declutter, but it really forces us to rethink the meaning of home and the purpose of home. That on one level, it is about rest and acceptance and security and stability. It should be a place where we can go to find those things, but it's also a launching pad, right? Like it's a place
Yeah.
where we find rest, not so we just rest there forever, but so that we can be refreshed to go make the biggest difference in the world that we can. And so I think that the book kind of strikes that conversation in a way that's pretty helpful for people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like it. I like it. I like it.
Absolutely. And I mean, since we're here, like I'm assuming, they can jump on Amazon to find the book. Is there a website just for the book that people should go to, or should they go to your blog?
Yeah, there's not a website for it. Becomingminimalist.com is my home, but certainly the Minimalist home can be found anywhere.
Amazon, yeah.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Christian
Yeah,
Book.
and we'll put it. I mean, we're on Facebook Live,
Sure.
so I know Jesse's on Facebook, popping the links in there. We'll put it in the show notes and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
help get the word out. And so I guess circling back, you wrote the book. It sounds like it's having a really great impact, and it's been a long journey for you. But I've also, maybe not circling back yet, but my wife is obsessed with the show Tidying Up right now on Netflix. And so I feel like that thing might be, maybe we're late to the game, but all of a sudden I'm seeing even friends and family like reference that show. So how do you see those connect, I guess, like Tidying Up, minimalism, for the audience that maybe even seeing that show now for the first time?
Yeah. I think it's great. You're not late to the game. I think it debuted like end of December or something.
Okay.
So that's why
Sometimes I don't
everyone's
know.
talking about it. It's up there. No, it's great. Marie takes a little different approach than I do to decluttering, but look, I'm for any voice in the world that is helping people own less stuff. We see 5,000 advertisements every single day, and they all tell us that we're not as happy as we could be. Our life isn't as luxurious or convenient as if we're buying whatever they're selling. And so I am all for any voice coming in and like, let's rethink this a little bit. Is more possessions really making us any happier, or is it just adding to our worries?
To our stuff. Yeah, totally. Well, circling back, so we're, Tithely, we focus on helping churches and ministries increase giving by making it simple with digital tools. But there's definitely a connection between minimalism and that lifestyle, and really understanding even the scriptures and the biblical impact and how that impacts your ability to be generous. So yeah, well, I mean, what have you seen as you've gone on your journey? What kind of stories have you seen around minimalism leading to increased generosity in people's lives?
Yeah. Number one, minimalism makes generosity possible. As we're owning less stuff, we find opportunity to be more generous with the things that we have. Number two, I find that generosity is not just the product of minimalism, but generosity actually spurs on minimalism. And this was a story. A lady, we were actually talking online, and she said she told me the story how she'd gone through her house and got rid of all of her husband's stuff, and it was great. And she said, no, I've done a good job of getting rid of a lot of things, but I've always loved clothes. I've always loved fashion, and I knew my closet was always going to be difficult for me to get rid of things.
So husband first, and then
yeah, right, yeah. I knew it was always going to be my hard spot, and everyone has a couple hard spots. But she said just the other day I was driving by downtown, and I happened to pass our city's battered women's shelter. And she said, I don't know if I ever noticed it before or never gave it any thought, but I started thinking of all the women inside, maybe left in the middle of the night with nothing but their children in their arms and the clothes on their back. And I started thinking of my closet full of clothes collecting dust, and how much beauty and dignity and honor that those clothes, which are doing me no good, could genuinely provide to those women. And she said it changed everything. I went home and I started filling up bags and bags of stuff to give to that. Like, it was the moment for her to help her see it. Like minimalism not just spurs generosity motivates minimalism. And I'll say this, probably the thing that I have learned more than anything else through this process about generosity is this: that most people, 99.9% of people, want to be generous. Yeah. Like, we want to be able to give and to solve problems and donate to causes that we believe in. This is something that we want to be true of us. So many people just can't seem to find the margin in their life to do so, right? They can't seem to have the extra money or the extra time. Money in this case, to be able to give. And so number one, I'm the church treasurer at our church, and whenever I talk about money, it's always like, I know that you want to give, like you want to be supporting what we're doing. So let me encourage you to do it. And here's some simple ways to get involved doing that. But I mean, I also just know the world we live in, right? Like it hijacks our passions and causes us to spend money on things that we looking back, we regret spending money on. So there's that piece of it as well. But that last thing is probably one thing that I've learned maybe more about generosity than anything else. But you've probably seen it as well, right? I mean, this is something that people want to be able to give, like they want to be able to support churches.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we see it. It's obviously the business we're in, but our whole company is built on the fact that, every employee loves serving in their local church and loves giving to the church, to the people, and and obviously, the money is only one aspect. I mean, the church needs it to run and to fulfill the mission and vision that the leadership has in that local community. But obviously, generosity is not just money; it's our whole life, right? And so, having less, or all the worries that can come with worldly possessions, to your point, like drags you down. When you can get rid of some of that stuff that's unnecessary, frees you up to give more. And it's totally in line with Jesus's teachings. I think it's, so there's a question from a viewer, and you said you're the treasurer, and I feel like there's something to unpack there. But so question from one of the viewers, and if you're watching live on Facebook, please ask any questions you have. We'll try to weave them in here in the next, give or take 10 minutes. But they said, how about disagreeing with your spouse on this issue? And you referenced the person who got rid of all their husband stuff first. How do you deal with conflict in the family, whether it's spouses, kids, whatever it may be? What helps people get through some of those hurdles?
Sure. Well, first of all, conflict in the family is not rare. Even
absolutely.
And so it's not, I think, outside usual conversations that we have in relationships. I was in for minimalism and owning less, and my wife was in for owning less. If I wanted to get rid of 80% of our stuff, she wanted to get rid of 50% of our stuff. And so at the beginning it felt pretty good, and then we had to reach a point where we're like, okay, how does this look for us going forward, where I'm hoping for this and she's hoping for that. And I think that that's probably the case in most relationships. Like in almost every area, right? Like, we generally agree that this is the right direction that we should be going as a family, but one wants to go this far, one wants to discipline this much, and the other one just wants to discipline the child this much. And so, okay, how do we sort that out?
How do we get aligned?
Probably the most important thing, honestly, for people to remember is that it is always easier to see everyone else's clutter than it is to see your own. And so I had a husband come up to me one time at an event and say, look, I'm the minimalist in my family. I love everything you said. I can't get my wife on board. What should I tell her? So we talked it over a little bit. 5 minutes later, the wife came up to me after not talking to the husband, and the wife said the exact same thing. Look, I'm the minimalist in my family.
Wow.
I can't get my husband on board. What do I say? And it's just because there are different things that are important to different people. And so everything my wife has looks like clutter, but everything the husband has looks like clutter. So So starting with your own things, right? Like you can get rid of your own stuff first and foremost. You can have this conversation in a way that would resonate with them. So, so you may be drawn to owning less because it would free you up to do this and this and this. But your husband or wife might be drawn to minimalism for a different reason. And so what would motivate them to own less? Like, have the conversation in that way. And then, the right time to have these conversations is not when we're frustrated, we can't find the umbrella or the drawer doesn't close because there's too much stuff in it. Like that's when I'm just sick of all your stuff.
Right.
But, over coffee or dinner and hey, let's talk about our lives and what we're seeing. And what if we had more money? And what if we had more time? And what if we moved into a smaller house? Like, what if we cleaned out our closets? How would that impact our life and change us for the benefit? That's the way to have that conversation.
Yeah. Baby steps lead the way. Like, don't force it. All those kind of things. Sounds like, it's amazing. So, I guess you mentioned being the treasurer, and I guess wrapping it back, our audience is largely, pastors, church leadership from churches of all shapes and sizes around the world. How do you help, like church leadership with this concept, which, we said it's not new. Jesus taught it throughout the Bible in many ways, maybe not calling it minimalism, but, what could church leadership do when it comes to, using this concept or teaching it to the church in all ways that lead to generosity, whether it's financial or in other ways? What have you seen in your church?
Yeah. Well, I know a book that would have a positive effect. So
read it.
The Bible and the Minimalist Home. They would both be very helpful. No. Okay. So, because I've given a lot of thought to this, because I was 33 when I was introduced to minimalism, and I had like van loads we got rid of 60-70% of our stuff that we just didn't need. I grew up in the church. I grew up in a Christian home. I was a pastor for 15 years. Like I knew everything Jesus had to say about money, and still I had accumulated way more possessions than I needed, to the point where they were keeping me from living the life that I wanted to be living, right? I wished I was in the backyard, not cleaning out the garage.
Yeah.
So I've thought to myself, like, why? What did I miss? And maybe the time just wasn't right. Like God just needed me in this one moment to really kind of challenge me in this way.
Yeah.
But what I most remember is that most of the conversations that I heard in church about materialism, about consumerism, were negative in their presentation, right? Don't be materialistic because this and this and this. Don't be over consumeristic because this and this and this. Don't waste your money on this and this and this. It was always like why I shouldn't do something. I don't remember any conversation. I don't remember any pastor standing up and saying, look, I have begun owning fewer possessions. I've begun doing these things that Jesus said, and here are all the positive impacts, the positive benefits that have come to me, right? So it's the same conversation, but it's a different side of the coin. So maybe that's the one thing that was missing, I think, as I was growing up and thinking about these things, that when you have the conversation of let's just talk about how minimalism would improve all of our lives and improve our church, that resonates far more than don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, because of all these negative things.
Right. Like focus on the positive, focus on the sort of the blessing and the increase that you're going to receive and other people are going to receive, and share those stories along the way.
Can I mention one other? In Luke chapter 8 is this, the parable of the sower and the four soils. And you have the soil that, it gets eaten by the birds, and one that starts to sprout but doesn't grow any roots. The third one grows roots but doesn't bear any fruit. And then the fourth one is the fruitful soil. And it's one of the rare parables where Jesus explains what he means. And in the third soil, it grew roots but didn't bear any fruit. It was choked out by the thorns and the weeds. And Jesus goes on to explain what he means by the thorns and the weeds. And he said the fruit of this faith, the fruit of the soil, of the plant, is choked out by worries, riches, and pleasures. And I have spent my whole life reading that parable and being thankful that I was the fourth soil.
Right. Yeah.
Like, how prideful is that, right? Well, at least I'm glad I'm the fourth soil. Mm-hmm. But as I look back on my life, and I think as I look back on certainly the American church, as a whole, and other, developed nations, I think for the most part, like we're the third soil, right? That we have faith, and we have roots, and we have resources, and we know Christ. But the fact of the matter is that the worries and the riches and the pleasures and the possessions and the fact that our homes are bigger than ever and we have more stuff in our homes than ever before, I think we're probably the third soil, far more than
it chokes it out, right? I mean, financial worry, that's a massive one. There's plenty of other stuff that comes along, but those things choke it out. They get us focused on those things, and we start spinning out because of all that worry and stress and things that come along with it.
All the money and time and energy that just goes into not just taking care of the things that we have and taking care of the house that we have, but like constantly pursuing and chasing and desiring more and more, and bringing more and more stuff into our lives.
Yeah.
But just want to mention.
I'm going to do one last question from the audience, and then we'll wrap things up. They said, how do you deal with sentimental stuff like your kids' artwork? Just sentimental things, kids' artwork, family heirloom, things like that. Like, how would you recommend people deal with those kind of things?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's important to remember that less is different than none. Right. So I talk about owning fewer things, not owning no things. And even in terms of sentimental items, I find that fewer tends to be better than more. If you go into a museum, what makes a museum great isn't that every piece of artwork ever created, that every heirloom ever passed down is on the walls or on the shelves or in display cases. Like, what makes a museum great and enjoyable is that, like, just the few, the most important, the ones that were truly representative of that artist or that season or that period of life or art or whatever it is, like, those are the things that we hold on to. It's a little bit like flipping through a photo album, right? Can you imagine going through a photo album where every photo ever taken was
it's like
was
on your
in the
phone,
album?
Right? Flipping through your phone photos, like you're never
that's
gonna
no
look
fun,
at all those.
right? It's enjoyable when someone has kind of curated those things, and what pieces of artwork from my child's life are the ones that he's most proud of, that I'm most proud of. They're just so many that they're shoved in a box in the basement, then they're not doing much good anyway. Right. Family heirlooms from your grandparents or parents that passed on, like, sure, hold on to some of those things that really remind you of that relationship and some of those values. But if you're holding on to so much stuff that it's burdening your life, like it's keeping you from walking forward into the next season of life, I don't think your grandparents even wanted to burden you with all of their possessions. Like, do you want your grandkids to carry around everything you left them? No. Like, sure, grab 2 or 3 things that remind you of me. That would be nice. But I want you to go live your life. Like, I want you to live fully. And like, that's how my grandchildren most honor me. That's how I most honor my parents and my grandparents, is by living my best life going forward, not by feeling like I need to carry those things forward, or even carry things from previous seasons of life that I'm no longer in. Some is good, but you don't have to hold on to everything.
Yeah, it's all of it. Yeah, it's amazing. We could talk forever. So this is awesome stuff. Maybe let's end on one thing. So what's one thing you would tell the Christian person or the church leader about getting started with minimalism, or just the impact it can have on your life?
Yeah, that's good you asked me that, because there's normally one other thing that I mention about sentimental things, and it's this. You don't start by getting rid of the sentimental stuff, right? Like, you don't start with the hard things, you start easy and you start simple. And so when you talk about like what's one last thing, I would leave people with like, go take one small step today. Go clear out your car. Like, go take everything out of your car that you don't need, or the living room. Like, for most people, they can kind of accomplish this in their living room. Make the change, get rid of the things you don't need, and then see how it makes you feel, how much calmer and peaceful, how much you enjoy being in your car, like how more focused you are on the day, or how much having a decluttered living room just allows you to enjoy the people inside the living room. Make that one small change, and enjoy it, and you'll like it, and you're like, where else can I, like, let's do this in the bedroom and in the bathroom and in the kitchen. You kind of work your way up to some of those harder spaces as you go.
Yeah. Great tips. Well, everybody watching, you guys should check out The Minimalist Home. Go check it out on Amazon. Go to Joshua's website. We'll link it in the show notes. It'll be on Facebook Live here as well. But Joshua, it's great to have you, man. This is a great conversation. It's good to get to know you a little bit and just learn about your passions and share with the audience. So thanks for joining us today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Tithely fam, we'll be back next week. Dean obviously dropped out. I think there were some tech issues. Apologies for that, but we'll be back next week with a great show, and we'll put this recording up online as soon as we can. Thanks, everybody.